Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Thomas. I hope you're all doing okay. Today in our writing video, I'm going to read you our topic book. Now, our new topic is What an Adventure, and our topic book is called Gulliver's Travels. Now, Gulliver's Travels is a book originally written by Jonathan Swift. However, this book that I'm going to read you today is retold by someone called Harriet Castor. And we've picked this book because it's got some lovely illustrations and some 3D surprises for you as we go through. So I hope you guys enjoy it. My name is Lemuel Gulliver. From my youth, I always believed it would be my fortune to travel. I little suspected, however, that I was to have such extraordinary adventures as those I am about to relate. In 1699, I embarked on a voyage to the South Sea as a ship's surgeon, aboard the Antelope. We set sail from Bristol, England, and at first all went well. But during our passage to the East Indies, we were driven off course by a violent storm. We hit a rock, and our ship split. What became of my companions, I cannot tell. I fear they were all lost. Finding myself alone in the water, I swam desperately until at last I came to land. I struggled ashore and walked nearly half a mile, but could not see any sign of houses or indeed inhabitants. At last exhaustion overcame me, and I lay down on the short, soft grass and slept. When I awoke, it was just daylight. I tried to rise, but found my arms and legs were strongly fastened on each side to the ground, and my hair was tied down too. I heard a confused noise about me, but in the position I lay, I could see only the sky. In a little time, I felt something alive, walking gently across my chest. Looking down, I saw that it was a human creature, not 6 inches high, with a bow and arrow in his hands. Further down my body, I felt several more of the same kind, as I guessed, following. I was utterly astonished and roared so loud that they all ran back in fright. Struggling to get loose, I managed to break the strings and wrench out the pegs that held down my left arm, but there followed a great shout in a very shrill accent, and I felt more than 100 arrows hit my left hand, pricking me like needles. It was most sensible, then, to lie still. One of the little people made a long speech, but I couldn't understand a word. I put a finger to my mouth to show that I needed food. The little man understood. On his command, more than 100 people mounted ladders and walked towards my mouth, carrying baskets of meat. I ate 2 or 3 pieces at a mouthful, and took 3 loaves of bread at a time. They were about the size of musket bullets. I then made a sign that I wanted a drink. One of their largest barrels of wine was rolled towards my hand. I drank it in one go. Meanwhile, 500 carpenters and engineers had built a vast wooden frame on wheels to transport me. 900 strong men raised me with pulleys and slung me into the vehicle. All this I was told later, for while the whole operation was performed, I lay in a deep sleep. A sleeping potion had been mixed into my wine. Then 1,500 of their largest horses began to pull me to the city. After journeying for more than a day, we arrived outside the city gates. Here stood an ancient, unused temple, considered to be the largest in the kingdom. In this building, it was decided I would lodge. Large chains were brought, which were locked to my left leg and fastened to the wall. Then all the strings that bound me were cut. The chains holding my leg were long enough for me to walk backwards and forwards in a semicircle. They also allowed me to crawl in and lie at my full length in the temple. When I found myself on my feet, I looked about me, and must confess I never beheld a more entertaining view. The countryside appeared like a garden, and the fields resembled so many beds of flowers. The nearby city looked like a painted scene in a theatre. Soon, the people's emperor, along with thousands of his subjects, arrived from the city to meet me. The emperor ascended in a curious turret to have the opportunity of viewing me. He surveyed me with great admiration. His Imperial Majesty spoke often to me, and I returned answers, but neither of us could understand a word. When the emperor had left, the crowds pushed as near to me as they dared. 6 men shot arrows at me, but they were seized, bound, and handed to me for punishment. I picked them up and put 5 of them into my coat pocket. I made a face at the 6th, as if I would eat him alive. The poor man yelled terribly, especially when he saw me take out my penknife, but I soon put him out of fear. With a smile, I cut the strings he was bound with and set him gently on the ground. I treated the rest in the same manner, taking them one by one out of my pocket. The crowds, I observed, were delighted at how merciful I had been. The emperor and empress visited me often. Little did I know that, at the same time, the emperor's advisers were discussing whether to keep or kill me. Soon, though, the people became less afraid of me. I would sometimes let them dance on my hand or play hide and seek in my hair. The emperor ordered that 600 servants should be employed to look after me, and tents were built for them outside my door. 6 of His Majesty's greatest scholars were brought to instruct me in the Lilliputian language. The first words I learned were to ask the emperor to set me free, which every day I repeated on my knees. At last, after I had taken a solemn oath to be a friend to this nation of Lilliput and a foe to its enemies, he agreed. My chains were unlocked, and I was free. Okay, and there is a small book in the corner here that I'm going to bring my phone down to, so I do apologise if my hands get in the way. So it says, The People and Customs of Lilliput by Lemuel Gulliver. The common size of an adult Lilliputian is somewhat under 6 inches. Lilliputians believe the earth to be flat. The only countries they know of are Lilliput and its enemy, Blefuscu. Lilliput has 2 political parties, the Tramexcan, high heels, and the Slamexcan, low heels. And if you can see, they've got different shoes on to tell them apart. Their greatest gold coin is a sprung. It is about the size of a sequin. The emperor's full name is Golbasto Momeran Avlame Gardilo Shiflin Mully Ully Goo. Okay, don't judge my pronunciation there, guys. One morning, about a fortnight after I had gained my freedom, a government minister came to speak with me. He told me that Lilliput was labouring under a mighty evil, the danger of invasion by an enemy. That enemy, he said, is our neighbour, the Empire of Blefuscu. War has long raged between our peoples because we believe in cracking our eggs at different ends. We Lilliputians are little Endians, the Blefuscudians are big Endians. During this bloody war, 11,000 persons have suffered death rather than break their eggs at the wrong end. Now the Blefuscudians have equipped a large fleet, he went on, and are preparing to attack us. His Imperial Majesty, knowing your valour and strength, has commanded me to ask you for your help. I replied that I was ready to risk my life to defend the Emperor and his countrymen. The stretch of sea separating Lilliput's northeast coast from the coast of Blefuscu is only 800 yards wide. I walked to the seashore overlooking that channel, lay down behind a small hill and took out my pocket telescope. Through it, I viewed the enemy's fleet at anchor. It consisted of about 50 warships and a great number of transport ships. An idea had formed in my mind to seize the enemy's whole fleet. Coming back to my house, I ordered a large quantity of the strongest cable and hooks of iron to be made. The cable was as thick as parcel string, and the hooks were the size of bent knitting needles. Having fixed 50 hooks to as many cables, I went back to the coast, took off my coat, shoes and stockings, and walked into the sea. Wading as fast as I could, I reached the enemy fleet in less than half an hour. The sailors were so frightened when they saw me that they leapt out of their ships and swam to the shore. I then took my tackle and, fastening a hook to the prow of each ship, I tied all the cords together at the end. While I was doing this, the enemy fired several thousand arrows at me, many of which stuck in my hands and hair. My greatest fear was for my eyes, but then I remembered the pair of spectacles that I kept in the pocket of my breeches. I took them out and fastened them as strongly as I could to my nose. Thus armed, I went on with my work. I had now fastened all the hooks, and taking the knot in my hand, began to pull. The Blefuscudians were at first confounded with astonishment. Then they screamed with such grief and despair that it is almost impossible to describe. When I had got out of danger, I stopped to pick out the arrows stuck in my hands and hair. I then took off my spectacles and, wading on, soon arrived safe at the royal port of Lilliput. The emperor and his whole court stood on the shore, awaiting the outcome of this great adventure. His imperial majesty received me at my landing and created me a nardac on the spot, which is the highest title of honour among them. Okay, and this has a little flap saying how the War of the Eggs began. So again, I'll bring you down. Oh, sorry. Extraordinary accident. I know Lucas will enjoy that pun. It is well known that the ancient way of breaking eggs before eating them was on the larger end. However, when His Majesty's grandfather was a boy, he broke an egg this way and happened to cut one of his fingers. Whereupon the emperor, his father, commanded that all his subjects would break the smaller end of their eggs. Lilliputian Rebellion. The people so disliked this law that our history books tell us there have been 6 rebellions. One emperor lost his life and another his crown. Blefuscan treachery. The monarchs of Blefuscu constantly fanned the flames of these rebellions, and when they were defeated, the exiles always fled for refuge in Blefuscu. Following the triumph over the enemy fleet, His Majesty asked me to help him defeat Blefuscu entirely and destroy all the big Endians, so that he could force all people to break their eggs at the smaller end. But I refused. I did not want to help turn free people into slaves. The Emperor and his council, however, could not forgive me for this, as I later found out. Not long after, I was woken one night by the cries of crowds of people at my door. They pleaded with me to come immediately to the palace, where the Empress's apartment was on fire. I got up in an instant and, helped by the bright moonlight, managed to walk to the palace without trampling on anyone. Once there, I found that the people were well provided with buckets, but that the water was some distance away. The thimble-sized buckets were passed to me as fast as possible, but the fire was so fierce that they did little good. I might easily have stifled the fire with my large coat, but I had unfortunately left it behind in my haste. The palace seemed doomed, until I had an idea. The evening before, I had drunk a plentiful amount of the most delicious wine and had a very full bladder. By the luckiest chance in the world, I had not yet discharged any part of it. Now I relieved myself in such a quantity and directed it so well towards the flames that in 3 minutes the fire was completely put out. It was now daylight, and I returned to my house without waiting for congratulations from the Emperor. Some days later, an important person from the court came to my house secretly at night and begged me to listen to him. "The council held a meeting," he said, "at which you were accused of treason against the emperor. In 3 days' time, you will have your eyes put out. Then you will be gradually starved to death, so that your carcass, being thinner, will be easier to dispose of." He handed me a copy of the treason charges, which I read with anger. "It is for you to judge what action to take," said my friend. "And now I must leave. I have risked my life in coming here." I thanked him heartedly, but could not sleep the rest of the night. To think, after all I had done for the emperor, I was now under a death sentence. The next morning I walked to the seashore, racking my brains for a way to escape. I could wade out to sea, but how far before it was too deep for me to touch the bottom? How long would I have the strength to swim? While I was pondering, by a stroke of luck, I saw what looked like an upturned boat some way off in the sea. I waded out and pulled it ashore. It was indeed a boat, and right for my size. For the next 3 days I worked at a frenzied pace to make oars for it. Then, at 6 in the morning of the day in which the emperor intended to put out my eyes, I climbed aboard and left Lilliput. Charges against the Man Mountain. First charge, that the Man Mountain did maliciously and devilishly relieve himself on the apartment of Her Imperial Majesty the Empress. Second charge, that the said Man Mountain refused to reduce Blefuscu to a province of Lilliput and to destroy all big Indians. Soon my provisions on the boat were all used up, and I was in desperate need of water. It was by great good fortune that just then I came in sight of a rocky coast. My boat was wrecked in the landing, but I managed to scramble ashore. Making my way inland, I found myself walking through a field of barley. What astonished me was the size of the corn, which was at least 40 feet high. Suddenly, I saw a huge creature advancing towards me. He was as tall as a church steeple and carried a reaping hook about the largeness of 6 scythes. Struck with the utmost fear, I rushed to hide myself in the corn, but I could not run fast enough. The monster took about 10 yards at every stride, and I feared that his next step would squash me. So I screamed as loud as I could, whereupon the huge creature looked around about underneath him for some time, and at last spotted me. He picked me up between his forefinger and thumb, and studied me closely. I did not struggle in the least, although he painfully pinched my shoulders, for fear that I should slip through his fingers and fall 60 feet to the ground. All I dared do was put my hands together as if begging for mercy, and speak some words in a humble, sad tone. The farmer was amazed to hear me speak, although he could not understand my words. He put me softly on the ground, and I made a low bow. Then he said something to me, and the sound of his voice pierced my ears like that of a watermill. I answered as loud as I could in several languages, but all in vain, for we could not understand one another. He then took his handkerchief out of his pocket and spread it on his hand. He placed his hand flat on the ground with the palm upwards, making me a sign to step onto it. Wrapping me in this handkerchief, the farmer, for such I concluded this monster must be, carried me home and showed me to his wife. At first, his wife screamed and ran back, as someone might do at the sight of a toad or a spider. However, when she had watched me for a while, she seemed calmed down, and said I could be placed on the table while they ate dinner. She gave me some crumbs for food, then fetched their smallest size of cup, which held about 2 gallons, and filled it with drink. I picked up the cup in both hands with much difficulty, and drank her health, which made her laugh so heartily that I was almost deafened with the noise. When dinner was over, my master returned to the fields, giving his wife what I guessed were strict instructions to take care of me. But it was the farmer's kind young daughter who took charge of me. She was about 9 years old and not above 40 foot high, being little for her age. She fitted up a doll's cradle for my bed and tended me with the utmost care. Soon I named her my Glumdalclitch, which in their language means little nurse. The country, she taught me, was called Brobdingnag, and it was to her that I chiefly owed my survival there. By this time, rumours were spreading about the strange animal my master had found in the field. He hit upon the idea of displaying me as a curiosity on the next market day in town. My little nurse, Glumdalclitch, was very upset. She feared rough folks might squeeze me to death or break one of my limbs by taking me in their hands. So when market day came and my master set off, she came along too, to look after me. I travelled in a little box, which the girl had furnished with a quilt from her doll's bed, for me to lie down on and to cushion me from bumps. Even so, I was terribly shaken on the journey. The horse's trotting was as violent a motion to me as the rising and falling of a ship in a great storm. At last we stopped in an inn called the Green Eagle. My master hired the town crier to announce that a strange creature was to be seen there, and soon people came flocking. I was placed upon a table with my little nurse close by. She asked me simple questions, for she had been teaching me the language. Then I bowed to the audience, drank their health from a thimble, and flourished my sword for their amusement. Those who had seen me gave such wonderful reports that soon people were ready to break down the doors to come in. That day I was shown to 12 sets of people, and 12 times had to repeat the same foolish routine, until I was half dead with weariness and annoyance. My master, realizing how much money he could make from me, decided to take me on a tour of the kingdom. As before, Glumdalclitch came too. She looked after me as well as she could on the long journeys, often taking me out of my box to give me air and show me the countryside. Over 10 weeks I was shown in 18 large towns and many villages and private houses besides. When at last we arrived in the capital city, my master took a lodging in the main street, not far from the royal palace, and put up posters advertising my performances. I was shown 10 times a day, to the wonder of all, but the hard work had made a considerable change in my health. I had grown very thin. The farmer saw this, and realizing I might soon die, decided to make as much money out of me as he could. Come and see the tiny man-like monster, only the size of a splachnook, shaped in every part like a human, speaks in a little language of its own, new to civilization, greatest curiosity show of all time. 10 shows a day at the Green Eagle Inn, no pushing, 30 persons per show. Before my master could put me to yet harder work, a messenger arrived from the royal palace. The Queen wished to see me. Some of her ladies had attended my master's shows, and their reports had awakened her curiosity. When presented to Her Majesty, I fell on my knees and begged the honour of kissing her foot. Instead, she held out her finger towards me, which I embraced in both my arms and kissed. Her Majesty was beyond measure excited, and asked if I would be content to live at court. Humbly, I answered that I should be proud to, if Glumdalclitch would accompany me. My master readily agreed, and demanded 1,000 pieces of gold as my sale price, which were fetched for him on the spot. It was not long before the Queen became very fond of my company. She had her joiner make me a pleasure boat, in which I often used to row. Sometimes I would put up my sail, and then my business was only to steer while the Queen's ladies provided wind with their fans. When they were weary, some of the royal pages would blow the sail forward with their breath. One day, to my horror, a huge frog climbed in with me. It hopped over my head, backwards and forwards, doubling my face and clothes with its disgusting slime. Luckily, by banging it with one of my oars, I managed to force it back into the water before it capsized the boat. Often the Queen would carry me to see the King. He liked to ask about life in my country, and my answers always made him laugh heartedly. "I dare say," he exclaimed to his minister, "these insects have their titles and medals of honour. No doubt they call their little nests and burrows houses and cities too." I was treated with great kindness, but to be the source of such amusement felt like a disgrace. I longed to escape. My chance came one day on a trip to the sea. Glumdalclitch was ill with a cold, but I longed to see the ocean, so I asked a page to take me to the coast. The page set my travelling box down on a rock on the seashore, and I cast many a wistful look towards the sea. The next moment I felt a violent pull upon the ring fastened at the top of my box. The box swung into the air, moving forward with great speed. A noise just over my head sounded like the flapping of wings. Had some eagle got the ring in his talons? Suddenly I felt myself falling straight down with such incredible swiftness that I almost lost my breath. My fall was stopped by a terrible splash. I was in the sea. And here's a letter. "To my dear Glumdalclitch, in case an opportunity to leave should present itself before I have had a chance to say goodbye, thank you, dearest girl, for the many kindnesses you have shown me. I shall be eternally grateful. Your small friend, Lemuel Gulliver." And then there's a book here saying, "How big are you?" So again, I'll bring you down. How big are you? Gulliver's Size Guide. Open here if you're feeling big. Okay, it says you're smaller than a Brobdingnagian spoon. I won't read that again. And open here if you're feeling small. You are bigger than a Lilliputian horse. What does it say? Remember, nothing is big or small except by comparison. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for today, Year 5. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. Good luck with your home learning, and I will see you again next week for the remainder of our topic book.